Speaking out versus smear campaign. Speaking out. Speaking out after being abused is something that many targets or victims of abuse often feel the need to do after the relationship is over. In part, it's because the fog of manipulation and confusion is lifting, and they are both incredibly angry and want to speak the truth, and in part it may be to warn others. To those who have never been abused by a narcissist, it might sound like they are acting in ways that are bitter, jaded, or overly dramatic. Or perhaps others may feel that they are unfairly attacking the abusive person's reputation and character. However, when a person speaks out about what happened to them, they are often doing so as a way for them to reclaim their power and control over what happened to them. Finding their voice and speaking up and out about how they were treated plays a big part in that. It is incredibly invalidating, minimizing, infuriating, and re-victimizing to be told by others to stop talking about what happened or that they need to move on. Healing from trauma takes time, and many people who have been through narcissistic abuse have lived in a fog of guilt, manipulation, fear, shame, doubt, confusion, and crazy-making for a long time. Often they were made to feel as if they were the problem, and when they realize what's really been going on, all that hurt and anger gets stirred up within them, and they often want to shout their truth from the rooftops. Part of healing means finding your voice and speaking your truth, and everyone does that in different ways and for different lengths of time. To have others try to control what they say and do is micromanaging, stifling, and feels very controlling and reminiscent of the abusive relationship they were in before. Not to mention that many people who go through an abusive relationship feel crazy by the end of it and struggle with CPTSD, complex PTSD, which makes them feel even crazier. Part of healing from this involves rehashing what happened, because in order for the brain to fully process emotions, it needs to understand what happened and where those emotions are coming from. A traumatic event affects a person's memory and leaves them feeling and remembering the situation in a fragmented way. Recovering from trauma involves putting together all of the pieces and incorporating what happened to them into a workable narrative that they can incorporate that into their life, instead of feeling that this is a bomb that went off and dividing their life into this event and then everything else. Smear campaign. A smear campaign is an unfair and untrue attack on the target's reputation or character by making false accusations that are often believed by others. Emotional manipulators are notorious for launching smear campaigns after the ending of a relationship, regardless of who ends it. In part, it's their way of maintaining their public image, and it's also a way that their level of denial and their lack of self-awareness about their behavior shows itself, by letting others know and reassuring themselves that they are not the problem. A smear campaign often involves half-truths to full-out lies, and usually the abuser paints themselves as the victim. For example, the abuser might claim that his ex-wife is manipulative and won't let him see his kids, and that she is nothing more than a greedy, gold-digging whore who sleeps around. What he's left out is that he was incredibly abusive to both her and the kids, and that the kids are terrified to see him. Her gold digging is wanting child support, and her being a whore is her starting to date someone new. So please know that while there may be two sides to every story, not every side is equally valid or even honest. News story. I thought being in an abusive relationship was hard. I thought leaving an abusive relationship was hard. None of that was as bad as the ongoing smear campaign my ex has launched against me. He's telling people that I was the one who cheated, lied, manipulated, and abused him, and many people believe him. His abuse just doesn't stop, and what's worse, I think he believes many of his own lies and is getting our children to believe them too. When I began speaking out about what happened to me, many people didn't want to hear it. They kept telling me to get over it, or that I should be happy he's no longer in my life. What they don't seem to realize is that I was abused and terrorized by this man for decades, and during all of that, I lost my voice and I nearly lost my mind. Now that I am free, I share my story in hopes of warning and educating others. I find it infuriating when people try to tell me what I should be doing and how I should heal. They aren't me, and they haven't been through what I've been through. And no, I'm not going to stop talking about what happened to me. Betty. Abuse versus reactive abuse. Abuse. Abusive behavior is to treat a person with cruelty, usually, but it doesn't have to be, on an ongoing basis. Abusive behavior is behavior that is disempowering, defining, demeaning, devaluing, degrading, destructive, dangerous, or deadly toward another person. At the core of all abusive behavior is a person's need to gain and keep power and control over their target and over the situation, and is done in at least one of these 7 ways: physically, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, financially, sexually, or spiritually. Reactive abuse. Reactive abuse is also any type of abusive behavior that is disempowering, defining, demeaning, devaluing, degrading, destructive, dangerous, or deadly towards another person. However, the difference between reactive abuse and abuse is that reactive abuse is a reaction a person has after being abused. It's the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back and is where the target gets pushed, either verbally, emotionally, psychologically, or physically, to where they snap and react back in an abusive way. The root of reactive abuse is an attempt for the target to reclaim some of their power and control over themselves and over their situation, and sometimes being assertive or leaving isn't an option. This can be due to any number of reasons, including fear that being assertive will make the abuse worse, trauma bonds/Stockholm syndrome, fear that their partner will leave, intimidation, or out of cultural, religious, financial, or other social pressure. Reactive abuse can be done in ways that are either passive-aggressive or aggressive, such as cheating in response to being cheated on, in an attempt to settle the score, or stealing money, lying or lashing out, and yelling, name-calling, or becoming physically violent. When targets of abuse start to become abusive themselves, they often experience a tremendous amount of confusion and concern regarding their behavior, wondering if they are just as hurtful and harmful as their partner, or fear that they have now become a narcissist or an abuser. While both forms of abusive behavior are highly problematic in their own way, the target who has become reactively abusive generally doesn't stay abusive once they are away from their crazy-making, provoking, and otherwise abusive partner. Even though abuse of any kind is problematic, the upside of a target getting to the point where they are becoming reactively abusive is oftentimes reaching their emotional rock bottom. This is their wake-up call to where they realize they can't stay in a relationship like this, as being around this other person is causing such a radical negative change in their behavior. News story. I think one of the reasons I stayed so long was because I felt guilty for becoming abusive. He would push my buttons or not give me a clear answer about other women or about money that would go missing, and it got to the point where I'd fly into a rage and start screaming at him. I never felt that kind of anger and rage before, and I thought that leaving him because he was abusive was hypocritical of me, since I had become abusive too. When I heard the term reactive abuse, I realized that's what was going on, and I also realized that I needed to leave because our relationship was toxic, and I didn't like the person I was becoming. Cindy. The cycle of a narcissistic relationship versus the cycle of a normal relationship. The cycle of a narcissistic relationship. The cycle of a narcissistic relationship tends to run the course of idealize, devalue, discard. But a more fleshed out view of this cycle tends to run the course of idealize, devalue, discard, replace, smear, campaign, and hoover. A narcissistically abusive relationship is often one that is full of intense and extreme highs and lows, where the good times are really good, but the bad times are really bad. Idealize. The idealized stage is often full of intensity, false flattery, mirroring, love bombing, and rushing intimacy, all of which creates a whirlwind situation where the target feels like they've met their soulmate. But what's really going on is they are getting caught in a web of manipulation and deceit that the narcissist is weaving. To a person who is not familiar with narcissistic abuse, the idealized stage not only doesn't come across as problematic, it comes across as, well, ideal. This is because the narcissist is morphing into being their perfect partner, which normal people don't do. This is why they feel like a soulmate or like the perfect partner. Over time, the idealized stage gradually begins to morph into the devalue stage, which often starts out with small, strange blips of confusing behavior that aren't in alignment with who you thought they were. These blips might be small things that they say that seem disturbing, confusing, or strange. Flashes of anger, rage, or silent treatment if you ask them a question about something that they are doing that seems strange or off, dress a certain way, or express an opinion that differs from theirs. Devalue. The devalue stage often progresses and involves any or all forms of abusive behavior, which includes verbal, emotional, psychological, financial, sexual, spiritual, and/or physical. This abusive behavior comes across in ways that are either overt, more obvious, or covert, less obvious or hidden, or both, and often includes lying, often to a point that would be considered well outside the realm of normal behavior, such as lying when the truth would serve them better, cheating, stealing, i.e. opening up hidden bank accounts, loans, credit cards, using household money to fund a double life, and or manipulating, pretending to want to work on things but living a double life. The devalue stage can be done to the person's face, behind their back, or both. None of this is normal behavior, and any one of these things is highly problematic and worthy of being a deal breaker. Discard. The discard stage involves the target being dumped out of the clear blue without sincere empathy or remorse as to the pain, such as coming home one day and filing for divorce with no notice or seemingly even any issues and insisting that you and the children move out, or suddenly breaking up with the target in a detached, indifferent, and immature way. The discard stage is not only cold and calloused, but it is usually done in a cruel way to inflict maximum pain on the target, such as breaking up with them after they've been diagnosed with cancer, right after you've signed a lease together, bought a home, adopted a pet or child, or right before a major holiday, vacation, or birthday. The reason for this seems to be that the narcissist feeds off of the extreme pain from their target, as it makes them feel smug and superior. Replace. You might find that you were replaced in record-breaking time. You might be shocked if you find out that not only do they have a new partner, but they seem so happy and in love, like your relationship with them didn't matter or didn't even happen. The odds are that they didn't find this new person after your relationship ended, but that this person had been in their pipeline for quite a while. Narcissists tend to keep a ready supply of people on hand that they can use, abuse, exploit, and neglect, so that they can get their needs met. And while it may look like they are going to live happily ever after, it's all an illusion, and this new person is most likely going to experience a similar cycle that you did. What you are really seeing is the idealized stage for the next person, which is also part of the devalue and discard stage for you. Triangulation. Triangulation is where the narcissist tends to create a triangle involving one or more people, usually with themselves in the middle. They begin pitting other people against each other and then sit back and watch as all of the drama unfolds. This is commonly done between their old partner and their new partner, in which the narcissist has stirred the pot and made each one believe that the other is the problem, to where they are fighting with each other over the narcissistic person. If you find yourself fighting over a person who has lied, cheated, stolen from or abused you, and that person returns to you, you might feel like you've won, but you haven't. You've lost and the narcissist has won, because they've managed to get their way, and to get out of having consequences for their bad behavior, convince you that you won, and hurt the other person all at the same time. Smear campaign. It's bad enough to have a relationship come to an abrupt end, but then to find out they are telling everyone all these lies about you can be shocking, confusing, and feel almost emotionally unbearable, especially if they are running around telling people, usually those who know you, that you were the abusive and manipulative one. To add to the level of confusion and crazy-making, they may be telling people that you did everything that they actually did to you. A smear campaign involves smearing another person's character, and with narcissists, it's very common for them to spin things around to make themselves the victim of the situation, conveniently leaving out everything that they did, when this is not the truth of the situation. And again, because they can come across as so intense and sincere with their claims of being abused by you, many other people tend to believe them. They may say that you were the one who was emotionally or physically abusive when it was them. And oftentimes, many of the stories that they spin have just enough of a kernel of truth in them that they can be seen as believable. So, for example, they may say how cruel and mean you are because you won't let them see the children, but they leave out that you have a restraining order against them for being physically abusive to both you and the children. And of course, if they can provoke you into being reactively abusive, then this only further cements their twisted narrative that you are the problem and that they are the victim of you. Flying monkeys. A flying monkey is a person who has been manipulated by a narcissist to do their bidding, thinking that they are doing the right thing, which usually involves attacking their former target or pushing their former target back into the manipulation ship. The flying monkeys can be unrelenting and can, and often do, attack a person online and in person, making their life a living hell. This is one of the many reasons when people get out of an abusive relationship, they're often forced to cut contact with many other people in their life, or even move to escape the ongoing abuse and torment. Hoovering. This is where the narcissist attempts to reopen communication with the goal of sucking a person back into a relationship or back into the pipeline to be used again at some point down the road. A hoover can come across in a wide variety of ways, and targets usually respond if they feel guilty for not responding, obligated to respond, or painfully alone and miss the good times they had with the narcissist. Frankly, I view any form of communication by an abusive or exploitative person as an act of aggression at a potential hoover, no matter how seemingly innocent it is. And I think you'll find that the more you can distance yourself from that person, the better off you'll be. The cycle of a normal relationship. The cycle of a normal relationship runs something close to infatuation, realization, breakup, or recommit. It's normal to be infatuated with someone right away and to only be focused on the good, especially during the beginning of a relationship. Much like a job interview, everyone is on their best behavior at first, and then over time, the rosy blush of infatuation wears off and the reality of the person starts to be seen. Traits that were once cute or even seen as wonderful can now become annoying or even problematic. It's during the realization phase that a real relationship is formed, and that both people either try to work as a team or realize that they really don't have enough in common to try to work as a team, so they break up. The infatuation stage. The infatuation phase is often full of lust and some degree of idealization. Both people may want to talk to each other for hours on end, and may rush into having sex or sharing a lot about their lives. The difference between the infatuation stage of a normal relationship and the idealized stage of a narcissistic relationship is that the infatuation stage may move fast, but it doesn't come across as immature, saying "I love you" when they really don't know you, or otherwise wanting to combine lives right away. And there isn't an intense soulmate connection that is established within a few hours, days, or weeks. Now, I'm not saying that all people who profess their love right away are emotional manipulators, but what I am saying is that it is problematic and immature when a person claims to love another person without really knowing them, and it is problematic to get caught up in a whirlwind because whirlwind romances, more often than not, turn into tornadoes, and it's hard to see the damage that is being done until the dust settles. If a relationship is real, then there's no rush. It will still be there a month from now. The reward of going slow far outweighs the risk of rushing in and making major decisions when you aren't seeing things clearly and only have the information they are providing you with, which may or may not be true. The realization phase. This phase happens a few months into the relationship, when both people start to get more comfortable with being themselves. Both partners begin to really examine if this other person is a good fit for them and their life. The breakup or double down phase. Once each person is thinking more clearly, they are able to make a decision as to how to proceed. Do they need to break up, or are things worth doubling down and really committing to the relationship? A normal, healthy relationship does not include abuse of any kind, and it does not include treating the other person or their boundaries with a lack of dignity or respect. News story. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how much abuse in a relationship was normal. Then someone told me that abuse in a relationship was like having poop in your soup. They said you wouldn't eat soup with any amount of poop in it, and abuse in a relationship is very much the same thing. Being in a relationship with any amount of abuse in it is still toxic. That really clicked for me. No amount of abuse is okay, ever. No name cited here. Going through so much together versus being put through so much by them. Going through so much together. Going through so much together involves riding out the highs and lows of life together. The highs and lows of life often include learning to work together as a couple, starting and ending careers, navigating good and bad economies, learning to communicate effectively, learning to parent together as a team, raising children, etc. In other words, it's the ups and downs of life and learning to work as a team that are the challenge and involve setting aside what's in the individual's best interest and focusing instead on what's in the best interest of the team. Going through so much together is a lot like taking up kayaking with another person and learning how to paddle in sync with them and navigating the rapids, rocks, debris, and other challenges that come up. Being put through so much by them. Being put through so much means riding out the highs and lows of someone else's selfish and destructive behavior. What many people are put through often includes addiction, adultery, chronic lying, manipulating, deceiving, and abuse of all kinds. Being put through so much by another person is a lot like taking up kayaking with another person and thinking that you are learning to paddle in sync with them, only to find out they are drilling holes in the boat when you aren't looking, but then blaming you, someone else, or pretending to want to stop when you catch them. News story. I stayed for so long because I guess I kept thinking we'd finally turn that corner and that he'd stop drinking, cheating, lying, and so on. I think there was a fear on my end, like we'd already been through so much together, that if I left now he'd find someone else and live this amazing life with them, that someone else would then benefit from all my hard work, pain, and suffering that I'd put into this relationship. I was telling a friend this, and she pointed out that we hadn't been through anything together, that he'd been busy living his life and doing whatever he wanted to do, but that I was the one who was being put through hell by holding on. When I realized she was right, that's when I knew I needed to let go. A relationship takes work, but it also takes two people who actually want to make it work. I can't make him get sober or make him faithful. He has to sincerely want to change, and he never did. He just wanted me to forgive him and put up with it all. Tina. News story. I love the kayak analogy, except I have to tell you in my case, with my family members, I felt like I was doing all of the paddling, and meanwhile they were using me for target practice while I was so very busy paddling. And of course, when I asked for them to stop shooting at me, they'd tell me that I had screwed up paddling so badly that they'd had to shoot me just to get me to straighten up and paddle right. And it took me decades before I stopped to wonder why they weren't paddling and why I was doing all the work. Lucy. Acting the part versus actually changing. Acting the part. Acting the part involves an emotional manipulator being on their best behavior or being what their target needs in order to stay in the relationship. Acting the part often involves an emotional manipulator talking about going to therapy, rehab, church, or even showing great insight into their problematic or abusive behavior, which often leads their partner to think that they are finally getting through to them, and that this time things will really be different. They may become helpful around the house, starting to be responsible with money, and taking up a seemingly strong interest in recommitting to the relationship to make things work. Acting the part is similar to speeding and then seeing a police officer on the side of the road. Most people, even if they aren't speeding, instantly put on their best driving behavior. They usually slow down and are hyper-aware of the speed limit. They use their turn signals, make sure they have their seatbelt on, etc. But after a period of time, that fear goes away, and so does their level of concern, and they slip back into their old driving behavior. Emotional manipulators work very much the same way. They can really do a great job of acting the part for a while, until they get comfortable again and the threat of their partner leaving is over. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is that they not only settle back into their old ways, they learn to cover their tracks much better. Actually changing. Actually changing involves no longer having the same problematic behavior. Actually changing means being fully and totally open and honest about all problematic behavior, having open and honest conversations about their problematic behavior and how their partner feels, being willing to live a life of total transparency, as well as being eagerly willing to take sincere, ongoing, and massive actions to fix the damage done by their problematic behavior. Change can only be measured by consistent behavior over time, a minimum of 18 months, to see if a person is really changed. What tends to happen with narcissistic partners who lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, or who have addictions is that they learned what they need to say and do in order to keep their target sucked in, so they can go on doing what they are going to do. And the whole time, they get better at hiding their behavior by opening up hidden credit cards, extra email accounts, having multiple phones or phone numbers, fake social media accounts, etc. In my opinion, it's a mistake to try to rebuild trust, let alone a relationship with a person who acts single and or selfish when you aren't looking, because odds are what you know is only the tip of the iceberg. And when you find out that someone lacks a moral compass, it's a good idea to see that clearly and not think that they'll ever change, because holding on to hope that they'll someday be something they are not is setting yourself up for a lifetime of hurt and heartache with this person. News story. After I caught my ex cheating, he became the perfect husband. We went through couples counseling for 10 sessions. He gave me all the passwords for his phone and his computer, and he was incredibly attentive and helpful with the kids. Even though he seemed to change so fast, I felt like I didn't want to question it, because after all, he was acting like the perfect husband and seemed sincerely remorseful for what he'd done. A coworker was the one who told me to check online dating sites, and sure enough, he had profiles on a few. The more I dug, the more I realized that he had fake email accounts, fake Facebook profiles, you name it. All the information he gave me were to the accounts he knew were clean. He hadn't changed at all. He'd just gotten better at hiding what he was up to and acting the part of changing. Jamie. Insincere remorse versus sincere remorse. Insincere remorse. Insincere remorse involves saying or doing whatever a person needs to say in order to get what they want. Insincere remorse is often what's given by emotional manipulators, and often includes either giving an apology that the abuser doesn't really mean, crying crocodile tears, or giving excuses as to why they acted the way they did, but continuing to withhold the full truth, or otherwise not being fully accountable for their actions. Insincere remorse comes across in a wide variety of ways, perhaps the most common being either intense and sweeping gestures, such as grand professions that things will change, begging, pleading, or the abuser crying to the point of sobbing like a child, sending a large bouquet of flowers to the target's work, acknowledgement of wrongdoing to the friends, family, or on Facebook, or a seemingly thoughtful surprise romantic evening, or cold and calloused indifference with crumbs of acknowledgement given for what they did. Insincere remorse, when done in these ways, is often followed by the abuser's insistence that their target immediately forgive or trust them, and if they don't, then the target is blamed for holding a grudge or for being manipulative, controlling, or abusive. In addition, for the more highly skilled emotional manipulators out there, insincere remorse can be done in ways which look like they are being fully accountable, have appropriate remorse, and that the relationship has truly turned a corner. They may say and do all the right things. They may actually go to therapy, check into rehab, close their Facebook account if they have been caught sexting or flirting with other people, offer to answer any and all questions their partner has, or even offer up their phone for their target to check if they want. What I've seen happen and have personally experienced is that these acts of sincere remorse are, in fact, nothing more than another level to their emotional con game. I've had people share experiences with their partner having multiple phones, or having their partner actually meet the person they cheated with, while manipulating each of their targets to think the other one was the problem. Emotional manipulators are damn good at what they do, and normal, decent people cannot even begin to fathom all of the ways and levels that they will go to in order to manipulate. For these reasons, having deal-breaker behavior is vitally important, as what's come to light about their behavior is only ever the tip of the iceberg. Sincere remorse. Sincere remorse involves a person having full accountability and transparency regarding their actions, not blaming others, not giving half-baked apologies where the target or something else is being blamed, and them taking massive, consistent action to repair the damage done by their behavior. A person who is sincerely remorseful also understands that their behavior was damaging and that trust will need to be rebuilt, and that will take time. They do not insist that their partner get over being hurt or immediately trust them again. And while they might not like all the questions their partner has regarding their breach of trust, they understand that their partner needs answers in order for them to start rebuilding trust. A large part of rebuilding trust also comes from taking massive action towards repairing the relationship. Remember, the only sincere apology is changed action. If a person continues to have the same hurtful behavior, then they aren't sorry and you are being manipulated. News story. Whatever I would catch him doing, he'd either deny it, flat out blame me, or give me some half-assed acknowledgement of what he did, and then he'd blame me. Getting the truth out of him was like pulling teeth, and even then he'd never fully own what he did. It was always someone else's fault. It was like being married to an ill-behaved child. Cindy. News story. He would always say all the right things whenever he got caught cheating, lying, racking up debt, whatever. I'd believe all his promises of change, and then, sure enough, a few months or a few years later, he was back doing the same things again. I couldn't figure out why he could never change for long. It took over 10 years for me to realize that he was totally fine with lying, cheating, stealing, and didn't want to stop. I guess I thought that he would want to have a drama-free life and settle down and have a family because I thought that's why people got married. It didn't even dawn on me that people would get married with no plans of ever being faithful. I think that's what really bothered me, was that he led me to believe that we would be faithful and honest with each other, and he never had any intentions of being that way. It took me a while to understand why he even wanted to be married, when he apparently was acting single whenever I wasn't around. He wanted the best of both worlds is what it was. What's crazy is that he's upset that I divorced him, like I was immoral or selfish for doing so. Virginia.